can't handle the truth.
And welcome, folks. This is Truth versus News on Sunday, October the 13th. We're a special session today. So much is happening. I just want to read one little quick thing here. This is preeminently the time to speak the truth, the whole truth, frankly and boldly. And as I learn more and more each day, I am coming to the conclusion that what is taking place is not an impeachment, but it's a coup. And Donald Trump said that latter part. And so we got some real critical times here, folks. Time for the truth, and we got the truth, and that nobody's told us fake news. But we got the, and we have the most dangerous mind in America, Jim Fetzer, and of course Scott Bennett is doing fantastic work too. So, Jim, what's happening with like Fox News and things?
Well, Don, things are developing so fast it's almost impossible to keep up. For example, Hunter Biden is now stepping down from a position as on the board of directors, seeking to make it appear as though he has clean hands. Yeah. The situation is precisely the opposite. Yep. We had Chuck Todd scolding Ron Johnson, a Republican senator here from Wisconsin, on Meet the Press because he was standing up for Donald Trump. It was embarrassingly bad. Todd, I think, burnished his credentials as, I'm now convinced, a CIA spokesman by saying, I have no idea why a Fox News conspiracy propaganda stuff is popping up here. I have no idea. I know no idea what we're doing here as though Ron Johnson were in the wrong. We know, of course, massively that Joe Biden performed precisely the improper action that Donald Trump is wrongly accused of having performed by threatening to withhold $1 billion in financial aid from Ukraine. Unless a prosecutor were fired, he gave him 6 hours and said, if he's not fired, you're not getting the money. And then he said, well, son of a bee, they actually fired him. Embarrassingly bad. He claims he's never had any interaction with the oil company executive, but here we have a video, a tweet the president had put up that was actually removed by Twitter, where you can see Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and the Ukrainian gas company executive. The conspiracy propaganda stuff shouting down from Zero Hedge. There was a full-on Trump-Ukraine blow-up on Sunday's Meet the Press with Chuck Todd, to slam what he called Fox News conspiracy propaganda stuff. Senator Ron Johnson launched a defense of Trump when pressed by Todd over some of his recent comments, firmly denying the Democrats' allegation that the White House had withheld military aid to Ukraine in a quid pro quo situation related to Biden's dealings there. In fact, he was simply asking the Ukraine to investigate under a treaty the U.S. has with Ukraine. Johnson told Todd, you got former CIA Director John Brennan on. You ought to ask Brennan what Peter Strzok meant when he texted Lisa Page on December 15, 2016, and it was about to quote about the insurance policy when Todd interrupted him. He said it has everything to do with Ukraine, Johnson retorted. Todd then cut in again during the senator's explanation, lodging the conspiracy theorist charge at him, embarrassingly bad. I wrote a letter to the Wisconsin State Journal about this. Editor, how we know Ron Johnson has it right. The media doesn't want the American people to know the background to Trump's conversation with Zelensky because it blows their cover and destroys their narrative. One, Bill Clinton signed a treaty with Ukraine in 1998 for mutual assistance in criminal matters, where Trump was not only permitted but obligated to report crimes committed there. 2, Joe Biden boasted of having the Ukrainian prosecutor fired by threatening to withhold $1 billion in U.S. aid and gave the government 6 hours to get it done. 3, we have him on video explaining that he actually did what Trump is accused of doing, where the Ukrainian prosecutor in a sworn affidavit has confirmed it. 4, Trump immediately released a transcript which anyone can read, and there's no basis for concluding he had done anything wrong when you know 1 through 3. 5, voters in Iowa is not being affected by the nonstop 24/7 fabricated reports about this, where they completely appropriately regard Ukraine-gate as Russia-gate 2.0. 6, comparisons with Nixon are inaccurate because Democrats, Republicans, and independent alike supported his impeachment, but Trump supporters are sticking with him, and independents are split. 7, Chuck Todd revealed his bias in attacking Ron Johnson, who's a good man doing his best to sort things out and expose the truth of the matter, while Todd is promoting fake news. Representative Al Green, Democrat of Texas, explained what's up. I'm concerned that if we don't impeach this president, he will get reelected. That's why his party and their media allies are playing us. Meanwhile, we have a very nice report here. Check it out.
Okay.
That's a very appropriate political commercial that's devastating to the Democrats' position. Meanwhile, it turns out Joe Biden was personally paid $900,000, nearly $1 million by Burisma, according to a Ukrainian member of parliament. Former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden received $900,000 for lobbying activities from the Burisma Group. Ukraine's Verkhovna Rada member Andrea Derkach said, citing investigation materials. Derkach published documents which, as he said, describe the mechanism of getting money by Biden Sr. at a press conference at Interfax, Ukraine's press center in Kiev, in Wednesday. It's really fascinating how bad it is. This was a transfer of Burisma Group's funds for lobbying activities personally to Joe Biden through a lobbying company. Funds in the amount of $900,000 were transferred to the U.S.-based company Rosemont Seneca Partners, which, according to open sources, in particular the New York Times, is affiliated with Biden. The payment reference was for consultative services. He also published sums of money transferred to Burisma Group representatives, including Joe Biden's son Hunter. According to documents, Burisma paid no less than $16.5 million. The former Polish president, who became an independent director at Burisma Holdings in 2014, Alexander Kwasniewski, chairman of Burisma Board of Independent Directors, Alan Abter, Burisma Independent Director, Devin Archer, and Hunter Biden, who joined the Burisma Board of Directors in 2014. Using political and economic levers of influencing Ukrainian authorities and manipulating the issue of providing financial aid to Ukraine, Joe Biden actively assisted closing criminal cases into the activity of former Ukraine Ecology Minister Mykola Zolchevsky, who is the founder and owner of the Burisma Group. Embarrassingly bad. Here's a nice observation from Investors Watch blog. It becomes clear why they're all trying to destroy Trump. Romney, Kerry, Biden, McCain, Pelosi, Schiff, Mueller, Clinton, Hillary are all tied to sketchy Ukrainian deals. No wonder they want to impeach Trump. Mitt Romney's top advisor, Joseph Cofer Black, for example, joined the board of the Ukrainian energy firm Burisma while Hunter Biden was also serving on the board. Hunter was taking a salary of $50,000 a month, $600,000 a year from Burisma, simultaneously engaged in a relationship with John Kerry's stepson, Chris Hines, and mobster Whitey Bulger's nephew in a private equity firm that allegedly appeared to be laundering millions of dollars in foreign money from China and the Ukraine to Latvia and back to the U.S. That appears to be what's going on. Scott, your thoughts about these sordid activities?
Well, it's very interesting to see Chuck Dodd of NBC News berating Johnson because Johnson knows me. He knows Shell Game. I've spoken with his lead investigator, and I have the videos of my conversation with his lead investigator. So Johnson's key guy that was looking into Shell Game and the Hillary Clinton, State Department, Covington and Burling, Barack Obama conspiracy to steal hundreds of millions of dollars in Swiss banks and redirect them and do all sorts of stuff. Johnson knows about this. Johnson was briefed on it, and his investigator was too. I won't divulge how that's developing and going out, but Johnson's a key player. He knows the pieces. So does Sidney Powell. So does Trey Gowdy. So does Gates. So does all of these people who have been taking the lead in exposing this. So they're armed with some very strong, nuclear-tipped bullets in the form of documentation provided from Scott Bennett, Brad Birkenfeld, WikiLeaks cables, Shell Game, that whole criminal exposure. And I think it's coming to a head. That's one of the reasons that they're panicking so much about this. And the mainstream media, you're right, CIA assets, Mockingbird, they're all panicking. They're desperately trying to lump onto Trump what Biden himself did. The $900,000 revelation of Biden's getting paid by Ukraine, that's huge because that's what they imprisoned Manafort for, isn't it? Because of his failure to declare that money. So Biden and his failure to declare $900,000 is certainly going to be a cellmate with Mr. Manafort. Only, of course, he is not going to get a pardon. And I think that's what all the Democrats realize. They are not going to get a pardon. This is a slow thaw. It is a glacier that is gradually moving, and it's going to consume and crush all of these criminal activities of corruption, which they thought they were going to get away with if Hillary Clinton had been elected for 8 more years. So I think Biden and his son are on the dock. They're going to be increasingly scrutinized by the federal agencies that are tasked by the people of the United States to investigate these things, the IRS, the Department of Justice, the Office of Ethics and Responsibility, and all sorts of other things. And I think it's a matter of time that all of this comes to bear. And it's making Trump look better and better with every day. Jim?
Well,
real quickly, I just want to say this lobbying, is another word for lobbying bribery? I think so. And also, it looks like the son of Hunter there, he can get the money when the vice president himself can't get it, but it's okay for the son to get it. So that's just the way it rolls there in Washington, D.C.
Well, it shocks me that in the Wisconsin State Journal today, they had an article saying there's no evidence that Hunter Biden or Joe Biden did anything wrong. And in the Capital Times, which was once a fairly responsible newspaper, you find this headline. Can you see it, Don? Headline: Johnson, defends Trump, picks Trump over truth. I mean, that's what it says. Ron Johnson is choosing Trump over truth, when in fact it is they who are concealing the truth and attacking Trump for partisan political gain. It's embarrassingly bad, Don. Embarrassingly bad.
Yeah, Trump and truth both begin with TR, and I think they're on the same side in this case. Not always.
Meanwhile, pundit on Trump impeachment, one of the greatest miscalculations in the history of presidential elections. Democrats have lashed out at U.S. President Donald Trump, accusing him of breaking his oath of office by calling on China to investigate the former vice president and now Democratic candidate Joe Biden. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has said Trump confessed to his violation of oath of office when he asked China and Ukraine to look into the Biden family. But it was in accordance with a treaty for mutual assistance in criminal activities with Ukraine, and potentially the same with China. She's completely off base. China should start an investigation into the Bidens, no doubt, because what happened in China is just about as bad as what happened with Ukraine, Trump observed. Meanwhile, on September 24th, when Ms. Pelosi officially launched a formal impeachment inquiry after an alleged whistleblower complaint suggested he pressured the Ukrainian leader to investigate former vice president and his family, she seemed determined. But Pelosi hasn't always been so keen about impeachment. In a video in 1998, when it was Bill Clinton who was facing that threat, she accused the Republicans of being paralyzed with hatred and not judging the president with fairness, but impeaching him with a vengeance, which is precisely what's going on today. Thus, Scott Bennett, a political analyst and former U.S. Army officer, believed the Democrats have made a mistake by launching impeachment proceedings against Trump. The Democrats, including Nancy Pelosi, House Speaker, and others, have made a major error in judgment and miscalculated the effect of this impeachment inquiry on the American public. He added, this will only play out in Trump's favor. Instead of turning against Donald Trump, the majority of the American public will turn against the Democrats and see them as once again creating a fabulous fraud and lie. Trump is the fourth president of the U.S. facing impeachment, and ever since the Democrats brought it on, he has lashed out against their impeachment efforts, calling them a hoax, a witch hunt, even said it could lead to a civil war as his war of words increased. Meanwhile, John Sullivan has dropped the bomb. Information omitted from the whistleblower report, namely that Ukraine was already reopening a probe into Hunter Biden's activities back in February. I can confirm tonight, John Sullivan reported. The U.S. government had open source intelligence and was aware that as early as February of 2019, the Ukrainian government was planning on reopening the Burisma investigation. This was long before the president even imagined having a call with President Zelensky. In fact, it's before President Zelensky was even elected to office. This is a significant shift in the factual timeline. It's information that was omitted from the whistleblower's complaint. No surprise there. Meanwhile, Trump, impeach Schiff, not me. President Trump continued his assault against a Democrat-led impeachment inquiry against him Wednesday as he called for the impeachment of Representative Adam Schiff. In a series of tweets, he bashed Schiff and the whistleblower's concerns about Trump using his office for political purposes kicked off the impeachment effort, but where there'd already been collusion between the office of Adam Schiff and the whistleblower. He should be impeached for fraud, Trump wrote in response to a Republican lawmaker's tweet about Schiff, chairman of the House Intel Committee and a leader in the impeachment effort. Prior to that, Trump took aim at the whistleblower, presumably the first of two who have come forward with concerns stemming from a July 25th phone call between Trump and Zelensky. The whistleblower's facts have been so incorrect about my no-pressure conversation with the Ukrainian president, and now the conflict of interest and involvement with a Democrat candidate, that he or she should be exposed and questioned properly. This is no whistleblower. Turns out the whistleblower's lawyer is a big Democrat. The whistleblower has ties to one of my Democratic opponents. Why does the ICIG allow this scam to continue? Which I think is a very good question. Meanwhile, Trump had an impeach the swamp meeting at the Value Voters Summit in Washington, D.C., has been going very aggressively against the Democrats. Scott, your thoughts about these developments?
Well, I think President Trump's appearance at the Value Voters Summit is one of the most significant speeches that he's ever given to the most important audiences that he'll ever have. The Value Voters Summit represents the conservative Christian base, and it consists of Family Research Council, Heritage Foundation, Eagle Forum, a variety of think tanks and academics and scholars and activists in the Washington area. It's even more conservative than CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference. So I know all the people there from my days in Washington. I know Tony Perkins, I know Pat Fagan, I know Rob Rector, I know all of these men, Alan Carlson, Families Institute. These are very solid Christian conservative people, and Trump is making the appearance, and he makes some very, very powerful arguments, of course, that he gets standing ovations for. And it's specifically how we really are in a state of civil war. We really are in a state of the American government being hijacked by these bandits, these brigands, these criminals, these opportunists, these mafiosa thugs wearing fancy suits, but having the diseased dark souls of psychopathic murderers. And you see that in the behavior and the words of Adam Schiff and Nancy Pelosi. There is no truth. There is no morality. They hate the truth, and they are sprung. They are, I mean, really, it's like a watch that the spring has broken. There is something broken in Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Schumer and all of these people, and Cummings and this, whoever that black guy is who was up there saying, if we don't impeach this president, I'm afraid he's going to get elected at the ballot box. I mean, words like that are off the reservation. They're beyond any reasonable political discourse. So he is simply showing the people at the Value Voter Summit, and by implication, all of the most conservative Christians in America, the false coup d'etat, the blatant lying, the Ukraine gate, the Russia gate hoax, all of these things. And he said some very significant things. And the most significant thing he said was that he is bringing Americans back from these endless wars. And he said the biggest mistake and the worst mistake America has ever made has been going into Iraq, going into the Middle East, starting these wars in the first place. That is the most significant thing, the most important thing. The dynamic that will guarantee him re-election is by adopting that position, because it's the position of healing. The position of healing starts with recognizing, you know what, take this syringe, this dirty, filthy syringe filled with toxic lies and the poison of endless military war and death. Pull that syringe out of your ass, stand up, and slap some antibiotics of peace and domestic policy and focusing back on America first. That's what it starts. But you got to pull the syringe out of your ass first. And that's what he's done by saying, Iraq is a waste. It's a complete failure. It was stupid. People are telling me, oh, now we have to go fight on the side of the Kurds to fight against Iraq. And Trump said, wait a minute, I just spent $4 trillion on Iraq. Now you're telling me we've got to fight against Iraq because the Kurds are going to fight against them? No, I'm not doing it. I'm not getting involved with tribal wars. I'm not going to get involved, if you will, here's an analogy, of Indian wars. I'm not going to go fight the Sioux or the Blackfeet and then the Blackfeet against the Cherokee. I'm not going to go on and try and keep the Apache pacified. I'm not getting involved with all these tribal internecine conflicts that go back thousands of years because someone's daughter was given the Mohammedan throne of religious worship over an uncle or a cousin, and all of these tenuous squabbles have developed over 2,000 years. I'm not going to do that. Yeah, he didn't say all those words, but that's what it comes down to. You've got all of these tribal and bloodline feuds, and you've got the different personalities of the Saudis and the Wahhabis versus the Shia, the Alawite and the Syrians and all of this stuff. Trump, I think, is smart enough now to go, everybody else who wants to get involved with this is either dumb as a bag of rocks, or they're the most corrupt parasites in the military and the intelligence community and the government. And I'm not going to do it. I'm standing on the side of Americans because it's their sons and daughters that get killed. And he said that at the Value Voter Summit too. His story of writing letters to the family whose soldiers are killed, going to the ceremony of the dead when they arrive on Andrews Air Force Base on the back of a C-5 and the coffins are taken down, and the memorial funeral march of soldiers carries the coffin, and families and mothers or daughters or sisters often will jump onto the coffin, and the military holding the casket do not flinch. They don't stop. They don't put it down. They don't take the woman off the casket. They don't push her back. They keep marching. That's a powerful image. Imagine that. 7 men, I think it is, carrying a casket, and these hysterical women jumping on top of the casket, crying and bellowing and screaming their eyes out, and these men don't flinch. They keep marching forward. That's the sign of what real American military men are all about. And those are the men that Trump loves and Americans love. And we do not want to sacrifice in Syria or Iraq or Saudi Arabia or Turkey or any other of these shithole sodomite countries, these boy-raping savage countries in the Middle East, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia. I've seen them all. They're all like that. Iran's the only one that isn't. Syria isn't. The Stans, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, they're not like that. It's the Wahhabists that are like that. And Trump recognizes that. He's not going to put us into these wars. He's pulling us out. He's saying that to the audience that makes a difference. I'm glad he also didn't jump on and really rally any sort of Christian Zionist, it's Israel and America to the death. I think he needs to step away from that because Netanyahu's a dead man walking. And everyone sees that Israel could be fingered for these attacks on the Iranian oil tankers and all the other things that have happened because they're the only ones who benefit from a conflict and chaos in the Middle East. No one else. And Russia and President Putin talks about that. Rouhani's talked about that. And all of that is coming out. And I talked about that. The Israelis are the first ones to create false flags to try and genuate these smoke grenades of chaos and confusion. But I think Trump's speech at the Value Voter Summit is the most significant one that he's done. He needs to continue that. And all he's doing is simply exposing the criminality and the corruption of these people that have been trying to cover up the corruption that they did under the Obama administration, specifically Biden and Kerry and Nancy Pelosi's sons, Paul Pelosi Jr., up to his neck in this stuff. So right. Nancy Pelosi should be investigated for engaging in treason against the United States because she's covering up for her son's criminality. Biden, treason for the United States because he's covering up his son's criminality. He's getting paid. He's abusing the American people. He's using the American dollar to leverage political gain like a frickin' Sopranos mafiosa guy. I'm sorry, that's not what this country's all about. And the moment it becomes that is the moment you have a civil war. And I think we're already in that stage. I think it's already picking up steam because of what the liberal leftists are doing. Jim?
I by and large agree with everything you're saying, Scott, especially during your interview about this being a colossal political blunder. In fact, it's all a fake impeachment. It's not a real impeachment. You can't move forward without a vote by the House of Representatives. It gives both sides the opportunity to subpoena witnesses and all the rest. So, I mean, it's just embarrassingly bad. They're trying to rush it because they know it's a smokescreen and it's going to be exposed sooner rather than later. But your point, too, about Al Green, I mean, if that doesn't epitomize exactly what's going on here, Al Green says, if we don't impeach him, he will be reelected. Meaning, if we don't impeach him and try to tarnish him, the American people are so happy with what he's doing for them, all the benefits he's bestowing, that they're going to vote to reelect him into the democratic process. So it's a clear declaration by the Democrats themselves that they're sabotaging democracy in America, and that's where things stand.
Let me say one thing about the whistleblower I forgot to mention. Sean Hannity and Stranahan and these guys talking about the CIA whistleblower being linked to Biden, they didn't break that. We broke that. We broke that on Susan Lindauer's show a couple weeks ago. I said the CIA and USAID are one and the same. I work with USAID, I know. Biden was connected with USAID, thereby implication CIA, in the Energy Reformation Project when he was vice president of the White House. So Biden and USAID and CIA were working on the energy revitalization programs in Ukraine. Ergo, why the CIA are very, very paranoid about this getting out, because again, like Shell Game, like the Swiss bank accounts, they get lots of slush money for slush programs for regime change and assassinations and all sorts of Libya operations. So the CIA and USAID and Biden are in bed like a three-headed hydra, Siamese twins, incestuous pervert club. And they have got this whistleblower who was not a whistleblower. He was a leaker. He was working in the White House, no doubt. And they have another guy. They're in tandem, and they are engineering this story and funneling it through Adam Schiff, through the Intelligence Committee, to try and damage the president. So this is the CIA, USAID in the White House working against Trump. It is not a whistleblower. It is not a real whistleblowing story. It is a intelligence operation, and this once again is why Trump needs to have his Praetorian Guard of military people who have honor. Not everybody who's in the CIA ever worked in the military, especially in police enforcement. Only military men have a sense of honor and integrity, and they've sworn an oath to the Constitution, and they hold that dear. And Trump needs to transfer all intelligence operations and all of these investigations and all of the Inspector General investigations into a military mode and capacity to ferret out these people in CIA, USAID, State Department, FBI, Department of Justice, to really start to untangle all of these webs and expose the future operations that are going to be brought against him. He should do a blanket firing. Everybody who was in the White House before I got in, you're fired, and you have to earn your job back. I want to see who your parents are, where you went to school, who you gave political support to, who you gave financial support to. I want to know everybody in my White House, and everybody is fired as of right now. He should have done that when he came in. And that's the same thing with Romney. Let me finally say Romney got a copy of our report, Shell Game, in September of 2012. So did Reince Priebus. So did the whole Republican club that were allegedly backing Romney. So if you want to hang Romney, you go to Shell Game and all the materials that he got, as well as his backers, his campaign people. I had people calling the Republican National Committee. Reince Priebus got it. All of this stuff is part of a bigger narrative. The narrative of massive corruption that starts with, I'll go back to Brad Birkenfeld in 2007, 2008, 2009. It connects with Edward Snowden. It connects with Julian Assange. And all of that is treason because it involves the deaths of soldiers and the financing of terrorism through Swiss banks. Jim?
Yeah.
It's all in this book here, too. This book has got it all, Scott. You literally did it, and you wrote this in prison. So you pay the price, brother, and I really think you have the right to call a spade. And I mean, we got to get these neocons that are right close to Trump, like a Giuliani guy, the best mayor or something, America's mayor. Get these guys out of here. They got a lot of blood on their hands, I'm afraid. Go ahead.
Well, Scott, I got to say, here's what typifies what's going on. We have to impeach the president so we can find out what he did. Remember, she talked about bills having to be passed so we can find out what's in them. That's what's going on here. I do believe Trump's denunciation of the Middle East is going to have a tremendous impact on American voters, because this is coming through on the most important campaign pledge, which was really responsible for his being elected president. Meanwhile, we have the White House declaring war on the impeachment inquiry. We've been addressing a part of that taking place here, including what he's saying at the Voters Summit. But we also have a letter from the White House that, frankly, I thought was a very good letter. I think it's very appropriate. I'm going to go through the letter. I was therefore a bit taken aback to find that they had hacks on MSNBC and CNN and so forth who were attempting to dismiss this letter as though it were inappropriate or amateurish, when it seems to me to be spot on. This was now directed to Nancy Pelosi, Elliot Engel, Adam Schiff, and Elijah Cummings. I write on behalf of President Donald Trump in response to your numerous legally unsupported demands made as part of what you have labeled contrary to the Constitution of the United States and all past bipartisan precedent as an impeachment inquiry. As you know, you have designed and implemented your inquiry in a manner that violates fundamental fairness and constitutionally mandated due process. For example, you have denied the president the right to cross-examine witnesses, to call witnesses, to receive transcripts of testimony, to have access to evidence, to have counsel present, and many other basic rights guaranteed to all Americans. You have conducted your proceedings in secret. You have violated civil liberties and the separation of powers by threatening executive branch officials, claiming you will seek to punish those who exercise fundamental constitutional rights and prerogatives. All of this violates the Constitution and the rule of law in every past precedent. Never before in our history has the House of Representatives, under the control of either political party, taken the American people down the dangerous path you seem determined to pursue. Put simply, you seek to overthrow the results of the 2016 election and deprive the American people of the president they have freely chosen. Many Democrats now apparently view impeachment not only as a means to undo the democratic results of the last election, but as a strategy to influence the next, which is barely more than a year away. As one member of Congress explained, he is concerned that if we don't impeach the president, he will get reelected. Your highly partisan and unconstitutional effort threatens grave and lasting damage to our democratic institutions, to our system of free election, and to the American people, with a link to the interview with Representative Al Green. For these reasons, President Trump and his administration reject your baseless, unconstitutional efforts to overturn the democratic process. Your unprecedented actions have left the president with no choice. In order to fulfill his duties to the American people, the Constitution, the executive branch, and all future occupants of the office of the presidency, President Trump and his administration cannot participate in your partisan and unconstitutional inquiry under these circumstances. First, your inquiry is constitutionally invalid and violates basic due process rights and the separation of powers. Your inquiry is constitutionally invalid and a violation of due process. In the history of our nation, the House of Representatives has never attempted to launch an impeachment inquiry against a president without a majority of the House taking political accountability for that decision by voting to authorize such a dramatic constitutional step. Here, House leadership claims to have initiated the gravest inter-branch conflict contemplated under our Constitution by means of nothing more than a press conference at which the Speaker of the House simply announced an official impeachment inquiry. Your contrived process is unprecedented in the history of the nation and lacks the necessary authorization for a valid impeachment proceeding. Your committee's inquiry also suffers from a separate fatal defect. Despite Speaker Pelosi's commitment to treat the president with fairness, the committees have not established any procedures affording the president even the most basic protections demanded by due process under the Constitution and by fundamental fairness. Chairman Nadler of the House Judiciary Committee has expressly acknowledged, at least when the president was a member of his own party, that the power of impeachment demands a rigorous level of due process, and that in this context, due process means the right to be informed of the law of the charges against you, the right to confront the witnesses against you, to call your own witnesses, and to have the assistance of counsel. All these procedures have been abandoned here. These due process rights are not a matter of discretion for the committee to dispense with at will. To the contrary, they are constitutional requirements. The Supreme Court has recognized that due process protections apply to all congressional investigations. Indeed, it has been recognized that the due process clause applies to impeachment proceedings. And precedent for the rights to cross-examine witnesses, call witnesses, and present evidence dates back nearly 150 years. Yet the committees have decided to deny the president these elementary rights and protections that form the basis of the American judicial system and are protected by the Constitution. No citizen, including the president, should be treated this unfairly. To comply with the committee Constitution's demand, appropriate procedures would include, at a minimum, the right to see all evidence, to present evidence, to call witnesses, to have counsel present at all hearings, to cross-examine all witnesses, to make objections related to the examination of witnesses or the admissibility of testimony and witnesses, and to respond to evidence and testimony. Likewise, the committees must provide for the disclosure of all evidence favorable to the president and all evidence bearing on the credibility of witnesses called to testify in the inquiry. The committee's current procedures provide none of these basic constitutional rights. In addition, the House has not provided the committee's ranking members with the authority to issue subpoenas. The right of the minority to issue subpoenas, subject to the same rules as the majority, has been the standard bipartisan practice in all recent resolutions authorizing presidential impeachment inquiries. The House failure to provide co-equal subpoena power in this case ensures that any inquiry will be nothing more than a one-sided effort by House Democrats to gather information favorable to their views and to selectively release it as only they determine. The House utter disregard for the established procedural safeguards followed in past impeachment inquiries shows that the current proceedings are nothing more than an unconstitutional exercise in political theater. Two, the invalid impeachment theory plainly seeks to reverse the election of 2016 and to influence the election of 2020. The effort to impeach President Trump without regard to any evidence of his actions in office is a naked political strategy that began the day he was inaugurated and perhaps even before. In fact, your transparent rush to government, lack of democratically accountable authorization, and violation of basic rights in the current proceedings make clear the illegitimate partisan purpose of this purported impeachment inquiry. The founders, however, did not create the extraordinary mechanism of impeachment so it could be used by a political party that feared for its prospects against the sitting prospect in the next sitting president in the next election. The decision as to who will be elected president in 2020 should rest with the people of the United States, exactly where the Constitution places it. Democrats themselves used to recognize the dire implications of impeachment for the nation. For example, in the past, Chairman Nadler has explained, quote, the effect of impeachment is to overturn the popular will of the voters. We must not overturn an election and remove a president from office except to defend our system of government or our constitutional liberties against a dire threat, and we must not do so without an overwhelming consensus of the American people. There must never be a narrowly voted impeachment or an impeachment supported by one of our major political parties and opposed by the other. Third, there is no legitimate basis for your impeachment inquiry. Instead, the committee's actions raise serious questions. It is transparent that you have resorted to such unprecedented and unconstitutional procedures because you know that a fair process would expose the lack of any basis for your inquiry. Your current effort is founded on a completely appropriate call on July 25th, 2019, between President Trump and President Zelensky of Ukraine. Without waiting to see what was actually said on the call, a press conference was held announcing an impeachment inquiry based on falsehoods and misinformation about the call. To rebut those falsehoods and provide transparency to the American people, President Trump secured agreement from the government of Ukraine and took the extraordinary step of declassifying and publicly releasing the record of the call. That record clearly established that the call was completely appropriate, that the president did nothing wrong, and that there is no basis for an impeachment inquiry. At a joint press conference shortly after the call's public release, President Zelensky agreed that the call was appropriate. In addition, the Department of Justice announced that officials there had reviewed the call after a referral for an alleged campaign finance law violation and found no such violation. For the foregoing reasons, the president cannot allow your constitutionally illegitimate proceedings to distract him and those in the executive branch from their work on behalf of the American people. The president has a country to lead. The American people elected him to do this job, and he remains focused on fulfilling his promises to the American people. He has important work that he must continue on their behalf, both at home and around the world, including continuing strong economic growth, extending historically low levels of unemployment, negotiating trade deals, fixing our broken immigration system, lowering prescription drug prices, and addressing mass shooting violence. We hope that in light of the many deficiencies we've identified in your proceedings, you will abandon the current invalid efforts to pursue an impeachment inquiry and join the president in focusing on the many important goals that matter to the American people. Signed, Capelloni, a counsel to the president, which I regard as a simply excellent letter. Meanwhile, therefore, Pelosi faces a tough decision on formal impeachment vote as the case against Trump comes under pressure. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is in a tough spot. After caving into pressure from her party to launch an impeachment inquiry based on a CIA whistleblower report that Trump abused his office to pressure Ukraine into investigating 2020 rival Joe Biden, Pelosi must now decide on whether to proceed with a formal vote amid mounting evidence that Trump did nothing wrong. Trump has pushed for a vote which would allow Republicans to issue subpoenas as well as grant the White House the ability to cross-examine witnesses. To that end, the White House outlined in a Tuesday letter, which I just read, that they will refuse to cooperate with an inquiry that is invalid due to Pelosi's refusal to make it official. Never before in our history has the House of Representatives, under the control of either political party, taken the American people down the dangerous path you seem determined to pursue, wrote White House counsel Pat Cipollone. Meanwhile, Kevin McCarthy tweeted, think about if you went through a trial, but you weren't allowed to call any witnesses. That's what Speaker Pelosi is doing to President Trump now. The entire process is a sham. Scott, your thoughts?
Yep, sure is.
Well, that's a powerful letter, and it takes enormous amounts of time and editing to write something like that, as we know. That's a 3-day letter at the minimum, most likely more than that, but it was very well written. The only thing I would I would add, I like lawyers; they're necessary. I don't like the bastardization of law and making lawyers with a little British Admiralty lapel pin or bar number, only the ones who are able to go in and argue and represent law. That's totally a corruption of our constitutional system. But law is very important because law creates culture. Culture creates life. Culture is the substance of life. Law retards the expressions of the imagination, retards human behavior, prohibits it, executes it, imprisons it, or it allows it, it promotes it, or it's neutral and it allows it to grow. So law either stops something from going around the earth and affecting human beings, or it allows it. It's very simple. It either stops it or disallows it. Nobody understands that. Very few people do. Even when I was in the Bush administration, idiot conservatives would be like, well, culture just happens. Bad language, bad music, pornography, it just happens. Bullshit if it happens. It allows because of permission of law. So lawyers and the Democrats understand this. That's why they're using law and authoritarianism, tyranny in San Francisco, and law by prohibiting people from reporting illegal aliens. Law saying if you call someone illegal alien, you're going to get fined $250,000. Guess what? You're not going to do it. It's going to disappear from the ether of the culture. Democrats understand that. Republicans don't. Republicans are as dumb as a bag of rocks sometimes when it comes to some of these subjects. So law creates culture. Culture creates life. So what we're engaged in right now is a battle, not for the hearts and minds and the soul of the culture of the United States, although we are, but we're in the battle for the law that contains that life of the United States. Law is everything. And the Democrats don't have any respect for law or order or truth. They're about power. That's what this letter is about, is fighting tyrannical power through the constitutional processes that the Founding Fathers and all of America since the Founding Fathers are in agreement with, which is the Constitution. And the moment you violate or go beyond the Constitution, you're in illegal, unlawful activity. You have no authority. You have no jurisdiction. You can't do this. I don't recognize you. I don't recognize your authority. You have no power over me. I don't give you anything. So that's what these lawyers are saying. You, the Democrats, are off your rocker. When Trump says, quote, they're crazy, he's right. They're unlawful. They're going down this road that is totally outside the Constitution because that's where they're at. We have never been in the history of the United States of America at a place where we have such disgusting, pathetic idiots and lunatics and corrupt people occupying the hallways of Washington. I mean, I've seen it degenerate over 30 years. I remember the 90s with Clinton and Gephardt and all these people, but they were still somewhat civil. And Jim, you'll love this too. Remember in the 1990s when they were impeaching Clinton for, the little escapade with Monica Lewinsky and stuff like that. The Democrats were screaming bloody murder about impeachment of Trump. They were making the arguments that the Republicans are making today, which is the Democrats were saying in the 1998 impeachment of Clinton, you can't do this. It goes around the ballot box. If you want to impeach the president, go do it at the election, but don't corrupt the constitutional process. The Democrats were saying then what the Republicans are simply saying now, and now the Democrats are on the opposite side. So again, it shows the hypocrisy and the lies about this. Remember, the impeachment against Clinton went really bad for the Republicans because the Republicans were caught up in their own fantasy and power, and Clinton just kind of sat back and said, hey, I just did what I did. I have private lives. I like little girls and all that. And half, if not 3/5 of America said, yeah, we do too. Hey, man, if you're going to score the hot little broad, 20 years younger than you, hey, we're going to kind of chuckle about it and go, there you go. We can't do it, but, we know where it's at. That's what the majority of people were like in America. They said, hey, so what? He's the leader of the free world. He gets a few perks. The Republicans and Ken Starr and everybody putting on their, Puritan hat blew back real bad. The same thing applies to this. It's going to blow back very bad. I go back to my article on Sputnik. But this is a major miscalculation. The American people are not about impeaching the president because he's done nothing wrong. They're also not in favor of a tyrannical Democrat party that is completely off the reservation, that are lying, that are promoting Russiagate, Ukrainegate, the same narrative all over again. They're becoming increasingly seen as these rabid, crazy environmentalists, where everybody's going to be eating grass, wearing burlap, you're living by candlelight, without milk, without plastic bottles anywhere, without gasoline. This hysteria, this paranoia that the Democrats have been infecting America's youth with, Antifa and these young kids who have been in high school, grown up with these lies. All of this is going to be percolating in the American mind in the next year. And at the end of the day, they're all going to stand back and go, you know what? Donald Trump's like Ronald Reagan. He's got us out of the Middle East wars. He's stood up to the military industrial complex. He's gotten rid of conventional military forces. Prince of Blackwater said something very accurate. He said the reason we failed in Afghanistan and all these places is because the special operations forces were undermined by conventional army, conventional military. That means the big army, the big Marine Corps, the big Air Force, these fat, flatulent, bureaucratic bodies of military expenditure with no point or purpose, they consume and they take over where the special operations people went in, and they've turned it into a total mess. So Trump needs to get back on the foothold of special operations, short, controlled strikes, and getting out, but tempered with let's leave the House of Cards Middle East world alone. Let's work with partners like Russia to balance this, and let's get back to peaceful relationships if we can, the armistice negotiations, if you will, between Saudi Arabia and Iran. I think Trump's making a paradigm shift in that direction of foreign policy. Now that Netanyahu, again, is gone, he's a dead man walking, and he needs to be buried. And Israel needs to evolve a new identity, a new peacekeeping identity. After 20 years of Likud Netanyahu policies, it's done nothing but ruin and savage Israel's future. Trump needs to adopt that and go in that direction. And I think this whole impeachment thing and that letter is going to be key. The Republicans have yet to fight. The real whistleblowers, Jim, who have the real substance that Sidney Powell has, that all these people in Congress have, all of that material, Shell Game and others, is yet to come out. And I think you're going to see legal actions being taken against Pelosi, against all these congressmen and senators that have been given this material. and they're going to be held to account. What did you do with this material that implicated terrorist financing and secret operations between the State Department and Covington and Burling and Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer and Barack Obama and Robert Wolf, chairman of the Americas and Union Bank of Switzerland? What did you do with all this stuff? Oh, you did nothing? Guess what? That's misprision of treason, misprision of a felony. And I'll defer to Don because he's more of a legal mind on this letter and the legal implications of the constitutionality. Go ahead.
Don, comments about the letter.
Yeah, that letter is outstanding, and everything it says is right about indicting and other things and taking Pelosi et al. Out of there. What's taking so long? I mean, I think we realized way back when at election time that things were wrong, and they have gotten so much worse now, and they're just going hell bent on this. Who needs the evidence? We got the press working for us, and that's the whole thing. Truth versus news is something else that the news is really not our friend these days. It is really an enemy of the people when they can lie to you. I don't want a liar in my living room 24/7. And that's what we're getting. So go ahead. You have another minute or so.
Well, Don, I know we're very close. I'm glad Scott and I and you all agree. I thought the letter was simply superb. I was really taken aback when they had the so-called legal experts on MSNBC suggesting it was amateurish. I think he meant it wasn't a formal legal brief with a whole lot of legalese and citations, which were completely unnecessary. It was a political document, in my opinion. As a political document, it's completely successful. It's understandable. It's intelligible. It's well organized. Very intelligently, persuasively presented. Scott, would you agree?
Yeah, in a minute.
I do. I mean, this is a time when all men, goes back to the classic story, when all men are losing their minds, when all people are coming apart at the seams, when all truth is beginning to be replaced by lies and madness and corruption. Stand still, stand tall. You are a man, my son, that old poem. And everyone else is falling apart. Everyone else is coming apart. Trump is not. Trump really is shining because when he goes to these summits and talks, it's his own Trump comedy hour. It's his own inspirational moment. He's learning very, very well. He's even better than Reagan because I remember Reagan, and Trump has this capacity to kind of bring it down and go, hey, I talked to my people and I said, what can we do? What's going on? What's wrong with this? Why don't they like that? There's an intimacy, there's a sweetness and a childlike, hey, what's happening? Explain it to me. That's a powerful, persuasive salesmanship skill that no one else has. No one else has in the American political history has done it. Reagan hasn't done it. Trump has it. Go ahead.
I think you've nailed it. Don, take us out, my friend.
Yeah, we're nailing it all right. And there's a lot to nail down, a lot of jello that needs to be nailed to the tree. But we are here, Truth versus News Incorporated, here on Sunday, October 13th. And we're not having any fake news. No fake news here, folks. This is the real stuff. But to counter all the other hours, and this is the first hour of our show today, and stick around for the second one.